I met my wife while we were in high school. She was the first girl I ever confessed my feelings to, and I was lucky enough to have them reciprocated. We were pretty much inseparable after this. I only wanted to go through my crappy high school days if she was there with me. Something about her, maybe it was her aura, made me feel so much more peace. I was there for her through her parents' divorce and her mom's untimely death. Her mom had cheated on her father after 27 years of marriage, and my wife believed the amount of remorse and guilt she felt is what caused her to pass away. The divorce and passing of his ex-wife just made my wife's dad even more certain there was a family curse. Despite this troubling time, our relationship and love for each other never faltered. We got married at the ages of 19 and 20. My wife's outlook on life wasn't the best all the time, but she understood that there were ups and downs, and that life didn't owe us anything. Despite that, we were happy and capable, remaining strong for each other. We planned to wait at least 5 years before having children, but my wife became pregnant with our first child at the age of 22. She wasn't very happy, and she blamed it on her nervousness to become a mother. I assured her that we could do anything together, and that this was how family life was supposed to happen. In marriage, the children are conceived and the parents work through any obstacles life throws at them. My wife started to believe me and felt more hopeful and strong. Things were blissful up to and after the flawless birth of our daughter. That's when my wife's mind started to change. She didn't see herself in the same way she did before she had a baby. She never acknowledged how much value she put in her physical appearance. Once her belly was wrinkled and saggy, she had a hard time even leaving the house. She was a stay-at-home mom, and always wanted me to do the errands when I was off work. Sometimes I was too exhausted, and I genuinely needed her to go. Whenever this happened, she didn't fight me, she just went and got it done. Dates were non-existent. She wanted to stay at home because she didn't have anything to wear, or any number of extra excuses she had that all pertained to her appearance. I didn't mind dating at home, and we even had her father or my parents watch our daughter for us while we had some time alone. I always told her she was my woman for life, and that I would always love her body unconditionally. That's all anyone can ask for, right? I knew she was my wife for life, and I never put any conditions on that, including her appearance. I told her I would spare some money for her to get clothes she liked to wear, but she didn't want to buy clothes at that size. I told her I would work out with her every day, but she always made an excuse as to why she couldn't. She started talking about the family curse her dad believed in. I told her that just wasn't logical, and that she had to be the master of her fate to the best of her ability. My message went unheard until she was involved in a very bad car accident. A car pulled out in front of her, causing her to veer off the road and off an embankment. Her car wrapped a tree and started smoking. When I got to the hospital, she was conscious enough to tell me that someone saved her life. She said a man climbed down seconds after her and pulled her up the steep wall to safety right before her car exploded. I could hardly believe it. I told her that after this, she could say the curse was broken because she survived. She asked me to ask anyone in the hospital or police force if they knew who that man was. I tried to find out for her, but no one knew. After she was discharged, life at home was almost back to normal. I noticed she wasn't struggling with her self-esteem or overall doubt anymore. She told me she believed that the curse was broken because she survived. I was happy for her and loved this positive change. In hindsight, I did notice a few clues. I found a cigarette butt in her front yard. I asked my wife about it and she played dumb. She suggested it belonged to the lawn guy. My wife was spending more time on her phone, but doing it at times I wouldn't notice because of being at work, being in the bathroom, being in a different room than her when she was cooking dinner or when she was gardening. I never noticed enough to bring it up to her, and the biggest thought I had about it was that she was glad to be alive, and was keeping in touch with her relatives and friends. Shortly after I came to this conclusion, I arrived home to find a strange car in the driveway. I could smell burgers and dogs in the backyard. When I got back there, I saw my wife talking to another man while he cooked on the grill. I asked them both what was going on, trying to be nice just in case. This wasn't something I needed to be alarmed about. My wife smiled and introduced me to her hero, the man that saved her from the car. My stomach flipped. I didn't feel great about this. I never really wanted my wife to have male friends, especially not one that she felt indebted to. I didn't have any female friends because I refused to give temptation an opportunity. He was a good-looking man, and taller than me by a few inches. No wedding ring. Through awkward chit-chat over dinner in the backyard, I found out he was a firefighter, and that before saving my wife, he'd saved 3 dogs and 2 cats from burning buildings. My wife loved that. I felt nauseous. I called it a night and started cleaning up. My wife was disappointed, but let him leave. She was exceptionally quiet for a few days after this. I tried to tell her I didn't want her to be friends with him, because it was unnecessary and just opening the door to temptation. She said I needed to trust her to be a responsible married woman, and that she would always keep their conversations PG. I told her I didn't like or want this. We dropped it for a few days until she sheepishly asked me if she could go out for a AP. I told her absolutely not. She was upset and said I was being controlling, and that she could have her own friends without me being there. I told her that before all this happened she never went out anywhere, not even with me, so I asked her what made her suddenly want to go with this man. She didn't have an answer, besides that he was a good friend, and she did want to start going out more. I told her we could go out together, and I'd ask her dad to babysit. She made a face. I knew at this point our marriage was in trouble. She didn't want to go out with me as much as Hero. I told her if she wasn't going out with me, she wasn't going out with him. I suggested she meet other stay-at-home moms so she could meet up with them and get out of the house. She jumped on this opportunity. The next day she texted me while I was at work, telling me she found a group of moms that meet at the park every Wednesday to do yoga and let the kids play together. When she was supposed to be there, I left work to check. I found a group of moms doing yoga, so she could have been telling the truth, except my wife and daughter weren't with them. I went home and didn't see AP's car. I opened the front door quietly. I heard our daughter crying from her room upstairs and music coming from the finished basement. My heart started pounding. As I got closer to the basement, I heard the unmistakable sounds of passion. My wife's voice mixed with another man's. I walked down the stairs filming. My wife went all out for this. At least 50 tea candles were lit with rose petals scattered all around. They were having sex on the pool table. As soon as my wife turned her head and saw me, she jumped up and started saying no over and over again, realizing she was caught red-handed. She grabbed a blanket and told me I wasn't supposed to be here. AP started frantically grabbing his clothes and telling me he didn't want any trouble. I told him he was a crap hero and he didn't deserve respect from anyone. He was in such a hurry to leave, I didn't have to say anything else to him. I dialed her father as she freaked out, cried, and demanded to know who I was calling. The first thing I told him was that I just walked in on his daughter cheating on me. I put him on speaker while he said he was devastated and he never thought his daughter would do the same thing her mother did to destroy the family and cause so much heartbreak. She turned furious and didn't want to hear it. She tried to grab the phone from me, hanging up on her father, but I ran upstairs with it and locked myself in her daughter's room, picking her up to stop her crying. My wife frantically knocked on the door, tried to open it, and told me to let her in a few times before she started wailing and begging me for my forgiveness. She called me her husband several times as if that was enough for me to forgive her. She admitted she wasn't thinking about me or our daughter, or how much our marriage and family would be affected by her actions. I told her this was hopeless. She wanted me to trust her, but now proved she was a liar and cheater. She told me she knew what she did was a mistake, but she didn't do it out of love for him. She did it because AP made her feel better about herself. I told her she shouldn't have needed another man's or anyone's validation. I was her husband and the only man in her life for a reason. That's what marriage is. You don't rely on anyone but yourself and your spouse for meeting your emotional needs. I told her that emotions ultimately are not important and don't have to be an uncontrollable force of poor decision-making. She is supposed to make decisions based on what is best for her and her family, not fantasies or selfish desires. She didn't know what to say, so she just cried. When I finally opened the door and told her to leave, she lost her mind, screaming, telling me I couldn't just kick her out and separate her from our daughter. I told her I was going to file for divorce. She said until she was ordered to leave, she was going to continue living with me and our daughter, even if we slept in different rooms. And so we did that until our day in court. I showed the film of her cheating on me and got out of alimony payments. On top of that, her father's house didn't have enough rooms for our daughter to live, so I won custody. They got visitation, but they are both miserable and bitter to this day. My ex-wife has no one to blame but herself. She's completely lost her identity because of this. She has nothing to call her own and is too depressed to try to get a job or make friends. OP, this is an excellent example of why you should never let your emotions make decisions for you. Gaining control over yourself and your emotions is something every person should learn and practice. Life doesn't owe you anything, and your actions, no matter how thought out they are, will have consequences that affect more people than just you. It's a shame that so many women today have an entitled and selfish ego that ultimately leads them to devastation and loneliness. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I wish you all the best. Now for our second story. My wife, 27 female, and I, 24 male, met at the Burning Man festival. At the time, I had just graduated college and started a full-time job in Nevada. She lived and worked in Colorado. When we got to talking, I realized I never wanted to stop talking to her. I felt myself falling for her and wishing we lived closer. We exchanged numbers and started talking as soon as the festival ended. Really, she texted me even before I reached my car. We maintained a long-distance relationship for a year before she asked me to move in with her. I found a job in her state and packed my bags. It was only another year before I bought a house and proposed to her. Neither of us had more than 2 family members that kept in touch, so we had a small wedding ceremony with them. Our marriage was just what I wanted and expected it to be. I was convinced I had met the coolest, most suitable and exciting woman I could find. I wanted to love her forever, and she said the same to me. Before I moved in with her, she wasn't a very tidy person, but she made it a goal of hers to keep a clean, organized home for us. By the time we moved into her house, she was a wonderful housekeeper and a woman worthy of being a wife. She also really enjoyed her full-time job, working for a boss that was also her best friend. I heard a lot of great things about Tiffany. They met in college and remained close until Tiffany's business was well enough off the ground that she could hire people. My wife was there for her and proved herself to be an excellent employee. Since my wife was there from the start, she made a generous salary. I never met Tiffany, but my wife and her went out together every once in a while to blow off work steam, they'd say. About 4 years after we were married, I noticed my wife was holding her phone a lot. More than she used to. She started holding on to it or keeping it in her pockets. I seriously doubted this meant anything bad, because my wife was still just as sweet and attentive as she always was. Looking back on it, she might have been even more sweet and attentive than usual. On one ordinary Friday evening, she texted me that she was going out with Tiffany. I replied that I would meet my brother for dinner and see her at home by 9. I left the house to meet him, but he canceled plans. I returned home and went straight to the bathroom before turning any lights on. While I was in there, I heard the front door open and 2 voices. I turned off the bathroom light and listened. I heard my wife giggle and open the backsliding door. Then I heard a man's voice. I watched them from within the shadows of the house. They stripped off their clothes and jumped in the pool. They frolicked and splashed around for a bit before they started making out and having sex. I grabbed the man's pants, found his wallet, and took his ID. His last name sounded familiar. I got in my car and drove to his house. I knocked on the door and was greeted by a gorgeous woman. I handed her her husband's ID and told her what he was doing at my house with my wife. She didn't want to believe it at first, but as it sunk in, she became devastated. She started cursing and grabbing anything of his to throw outside. She invited me to wait with her inside for him to return home. I didn't really want to, but I also didn't want to go home, so we waited. He arrived home and his wife handed him his ID. He was confused and even more so when I stepped forward. I told him I found that in his wallet and his pants after he stripped for my wife. His jaw dropped and he just looked between us before getting frustrated and embarrassed, asking what was going to happen now. His wife kicked him out right in front of me. I wanted to leave, but she took a moment from yelling to ask me to stay. Once he was out of the house, she sat down with me and apologized for what happened on behalf of her husband and my wife. We got to talking and it didn't take long for me to realize this was Tiffany. This was my wife's best friend and boss. I freaked out and told her who my wife was. She could not believe it. She called my wife and told her she needed her to come over right away. When she got there, we both confronted her, telling her she just cheated on me with her best friend's husband. My wife freaked out, crying, swearing that she didn't know he was her husband. She looked at me and pleaded for me to believe that this was just a mistake. She said they had met at a bar, and that he wasn't wearing a ring. I asked her when and why she was even at a bar alone, but then I said it didn't matter. And it didn't matter how sorry she was, because she still willingly brought another man into my house and slept with him. Tiffany said even if my wife didn't know he was her husband, she was not the kind of friend or employee she needed in her life. My wife was broken in that instant. She didn't know what to do with herself. She just kept pleading with empty words. I told her to move out of my house. Tiffany invited me back inside. She screamed after us and even banged on the door. Eventually she was moved out of my house and the divorce was final. She was a huge waste of my time, but if it weren't for her, I never would have met my current wife of 12 years. Tiffany. Our exes didn't stay together after this. Their relationship was based entirely on fleeting emotions, infatuation, and excitement. I believe anyone could make any relationship work if they were selfless and wanted it enough. Of course, the feeling must be reciprocated for the relationship to last. Sometimes clear and honest communication is enough to get a drifting spouse to realize how much their partner and relationship means to them. No adult should be making such a foolish decision. Given enough thought, these mistakes could be avoided. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts.